Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Today, we're talking about building on the brilliance of students, and we're discussing insights that drive academic recovery in math for K-8 students in Texas. So we're very excited about this discussion. Academic recovery, of course, is a very big thing going on. This has been a year unlike any other, a little bit over a year unlike any other. And so today's discussion is about what do we do like now and going forward? How do we get all the students back on track? How do we make sense of what's happening, where students are, and make sure that we come out of this even stronger than we went into this? So today, joining our discussion, we have Dana Nathanson, who's an elementary math coordinator from Leander Independent School District. Hi, Dana. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Oh, perfect. We also have Amador Vasquez, who's currently the K-12 math coordinator for Lubbock Independent School District. Hey, Amador, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having us.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining. And we also have Dr. Tim Hudson from DreamBox, who's joining us as well. He's joining us via audio. There are just some webcam issues, so we won't see Tim, but we will hear him, and he'll also be presenting. How are you doing, Tim?
Hey, I'm doing all right. It's it's good to see you all this morning, even though you can't see me.
Perfect. Well, we can hear you just fine.
Great.
And we can hear your energy too, so that's all good to go.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for kicking things off, and to Dana and Amador for joining us. We have a lot of topics that we want to talk through. I'm a former high school math teacher and district math coordinator, and that's really before joining DreamBox, that was the focus of my energies. How do you help, that whole K-12 perspective really focus on developing so many mathematical thinking skills and processing skills that I know I didn't always experience when I was a student. When I was going through math as a K-12 student, a lot of it was kind of sit and get, kind of procedural, and it's really exciting to be here today with Dana and Amador, who they're doing some great work in their districts and sharing with you how they're tackling some of the same challenges moving forward as everyone else here is on the call. So we're going to basically structure today at a high level with several different topics. General reflections is how we're going to start, so you can learn more about Dana and Amador and what they've been up to and where they're headed generally. Then we'll get into the basics, the big ones, the curriculum, the assessment, the pedagogy. Hopefully having some time to talk about differentiation, technology, and partnership. So importantly, for those of you who are joining, we want this to really be a conversation. So you have the chat available to you. You have questions in the GoToWebinar like portal there, a little panel that hopefully you can see. But I think Dana and Amador can nod in agreement when we want this to be interactive, and we know that you have some thoughts, you have some questions. Would love to hear from you as we go along. So let's start with just some general introductions. Dana, let's start with you. Just tell us a little bit about your context, your situation. Yeah, just by way of introduction, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Tim. Excited to be here today, and just want to say right off the bat, this is new to everyone this year, this crazy year, so I don't have any answers, but I am just happy to be able to share some of the work that we've been doing here in Leander ISD. I am the K-5 elementary math coordinator, and so this is my 12th year in that role, and I am very fortunate to have two math curriculum specialists that work alongside me, and we work really hard to support our instructional coaches at all 27 elementary schools. Our instructional coaches are all content areas, so we're just fortunate to have them as support in the area of mathematics as well.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah, I remember when I was a math coordinator, I didn't have any staff. It was just me for the K-12, and I envied our literacy teams. They had an elementary and a secondary, and reading coaches in every building, and reading intervention specialists, 3 per building. Anyway, we won't get into that, but it is great that you have a team and have been in it for 12 years. Gonna really appreciate hearing your insights today. And then Amador, go ahead and a little bit of introduction in your own words.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Amador Vasquez. I'm the K-12 math coordinator for Lubbock Independent School District. I am also fortunate. I have a staff of 8 that works directly with me. 4 of them are secondary, 4 of them are elementary. The 4 that support the elementary support all of our 31 elementary schools, and then the 4 secondary support the high schools and the 4 high schools and the 10 middle schools. I've been at this job for about 10 years and really super excited. Again, also, I don't have all the answers, but I can share some of the things that we've done, and I'm ready.
All right. Excellent. That is true. We don't have all the answers today, but we do have some thoughts and ideas about how we're tackling things. So, Dana, we'll start with you. Back to you. Here's just some high-level kind of open-ended questions. A lot of us shared some of the same challenges when this whole thing happened a year ago. What were some of the challenges you needed to solve right away? And then as you reflect over this past year, did you come across any ideas where you're like, oh, you know what? That's actually maybe a good way we should do things moving forward. Like, how might some of the shifts we've made maybe become more permanent practices? And if the answer is no, nothing, then that's cool too. So
No, we do have some practices in place that we do want to carry forward and are excited about that. So anytime you're given an opportunity to face some challenges and learn and grow, and then definitely looking at what we can carry forward. But just thinking back to a year ago, right around this time, one of the very first things that we had to do was really get set on a platform and what our teachers were going to be using across our system as far as supporting students with online learning. And so we were fortunate to be able to do K2 using Seesaw, and we're using the Google Suite for our 3 through 5. And so a lot of training right off the bat. You know, people had been dabbling with that. We had to get devices in students' hands. And so all of that was a lot of work last spring, but we were able to successfully do that and distribute devices, and also get our families learning the online platforms as well. And so just thinking about that is obviously, those are resources that we'll continue to carry through. I think that through this whole pandemic, our communication has drastically increased. The way that we communicate with families via some of those resources, but also the way that we're able to communicate more across campuses in our district. And so, of course, you know, Zoom was all pretty much new for us last year at this time. And that is what we use to work with our students and teachers across the district. We have set some things into place as far as like supporting teachers weekly with Zoom meetups, and I think that that's something we'll continue to move forward with. Just being able to collaborate online versus having to, you know, rush out of your building in the afternoon to get to another location for professional learning. So I'm just really excited about the way that this has kind of pushed us to think differently. Not only about how we are reaching students and families, but how we are working together within our district as a professional learning community.
yeah, I think that teacher support piece is key. I'm having flashbacks to the challenge of which school are we going to have the after school meeting at? Oh, and there's traffic on this road. And oh, to know that the easiest thing for teachers would be just to stay right where they are, log in, join the conversation, saves everyone time. So that's a good practice to be sure. Did just so everyone who's attending kind of knows, did you previously have a one-to-one device initiative with students, or did this really make it happen? Is that kind of where you're at? Ever it's a one-to-one device?
So we did have it in our middle school and high schools, but not at elementary. We were more like 3-to-1. And so, you know, we just really had to scrounge around and do what we could to make it happen, especially for those families that didn't have any access. And, you know, we're even talking bigger than that as far as access points to internet in our community. And so our technology team really stepped up during this pandemic and were, you know, the boots on the ground to make this happen. And so whereas we're not exactly one-to-one in elementary, those students that need devices have those, and so we've made that happen.
Excellent. Yeah, that equity component of is key. All right, Amador, over to you. So tell us a little bit about your journey and where you're headed next.
So it was very similar to Leander. We're actually a one-to-one in our schools, except for the kindergartners. They did not have devices. It's interesting that the Friday when we left for spring break, we told everybody to take their devices home, told staff to take everything home. We somewhat anticipated we weren't coming back. And spring break started. That Sunday, we got a phone call and we started to work to get ready for what was coming. And so we gave staff an additional week off so that we could work and so that our staffs could work and get things together for teacher support. So just like Dana, we found a way to get everybody on board. Luckily, the kids had their devices. We set up Google Classrooms. We set up Seesaw as well. And we got to work. We started teaching the following week after that second week off and started meeting with teachers. We set up lots of meetings with teachers. The over communication was really helpful because Dana's right. You had to over communicate to make sure that everybody was on board. So we're definitely keeping those components. We also recognize that being able to meet with people virtually sometimes is better than driving all over town. So my coaches can now support more teachers because of that. And so that's definitely something that we will keep. During the pandemic, we also set up hotspots around town because we recognized some communities did not have access to the internet. So we made sure that kids were able to have access to everything they needed. So our technology department really stepped up in that manner as well. There's a lot of things I think that we will keep, but most definitely that idea of meeting with people virtually and face-to-face. We were lucky in August, we came back face-to-face. We were about 80% face-to-face and 20% virtual. And so we had the best and the worst of both worlds, if you will. And we learned a lot about how kids learn and how kids don't learn virtually versus face-to-face. And some of the struggles that they had in being at home and not being able to have that face time with friends and teachers and that human component. So we've learned quite a bit from this experience.
Great. Yeah, that's I think both of you touched on that device access, the hotspots, the different ways to make sure families can stay connected and students. That's been a recurring theme we've heard from around the country that really stepped up all the IT departments to get that done. Because, you know, DreamBox is a software that, you know, requires an internet connection, but this wasn't just about DreamBox. This was about everything. Google Classroom. This is about, you know, your Zooms, your Teams, all those different things. And it's been really cool to see schools make that change in the community, because that's what, you know, we should be doing with schools, is really taking that community view holistically of what students are going to need to be successful. In this case, outside the school walls, which is we had to be looking at more deliberately than normal. So with curriculum, let's get into there a little bit. And again, all these questions are kind of open-ended. Feel free to drop some things in the chat, those of you who are attending, if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share. But as you've thought about your curriculum, and maybe this was a curriculum revision year, I don't know if it was an adoption year for different things, but how have you changed the priorities in that over communication with teachers? You know, what are you communicating about? What needs to get accomplished at each grade level? What should be the expectations this year? How should we evaluate our curricular practices and things? And Amador, let's start with you on this one. What's the big picture as you're thinking about your curriculum?
So in terms of our curriculum priorities, things haven't changed in terms of what our expectations are, but we recognize that there was unfinished learning from last year, and then going into the fall, there was, because we did come back face to face, there was a lot of protocols that we had to follow to make sure the kids were safe, to make sure the teachers were safe, and just create a safe environment. So we recognize that maybe some of the learning wasn't solidified during the fall as well. So in terms of what we're changing, we're looking at our year at a glance document and our scope and sequences, and adjusting and maybe even blending the grade levels. So if I'm a fourth grade teacher, I may start off the year with teaching some third grade concepts that connect to fourth grade to make sure that my kids will be ready for the fourth grade content. And of course, we've definitely added DreamBox is our big push across the district, and making some of those connections with our curriculum. Teachers are beginning to see the relevance of how the whole adaptive DreamBox community works, and so they can see that the kids are actually getting a lot of the gaps addressed that they may not be able to because of lack of time. And so that's kind of our approach to the whole curriculum situation and moving forward.
Nice. I imagine, have you had some fourth grade teachers who were like, you know what, I've always done a little bit of third grade stuff at the start of the year, or were they like, oh, this is a whole new thing? How seamless was that ask for fourth grade teachers, as an example?
I think it was pretty seamless. I think they recognized that the kids were coming in with some unfinished learning, and so we had to put it on paper and had to put it in front of them in the scope and sequence so that they knew exactly what to teach. And our coaches created quite a few resources to help facilitate that.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know teachers appreciate that. Hey, happy to roll with it, have these expectations. Students are going to need some different things this year, and really appreciating that support and those resources. That's kind of the key. You give me enough resources in the classroom, I can make those changes. Dana, how about for you? What are you thinking in terms of curriculum? Yeah.
So first and foremost, we really wanted to make sure that our teachers came in with this mindset around having an asset lens and not a deficit lens for our students, because we have some students that had really great instruction or learning opportunities last spring, and we have some that had zero. And so we really wanted to take and build where students are. And that's like it is every year, right? And so what we did curriculum wise is we used the Understanding by Design framework. And so our curriculum units are written in there. And what we did is we looked at the previous grade level, and we called them our pandemic plans. And so we looked at the previous grade level skills that were covered last March, April, and May, and we embedded those into the next grade level plans so that teachers could have that knowledge to know what may or may not have been covered during the last couple of months of school of the previous grade level. And then we also embedded re-engagement activities within those units of study so that teachers had activities that could help re-engage the students no matter what level they came in at. And so that was work that we did with teacher leaders and our curriculum staff as well. As far as our DreamBox partnership, it is a partner to our core curriculum. And so we do have time set aside for that within our daily schedule so that students get some of those gap filling skills. And like my colleague mentioned as well, that sometimes in mathematics, we don't always know how to exactly pinpoint where those gaps are. And so, especially in elementary. And so that's where DreamBox has been a great partner for us to help really gap fill when needed. And so we are seeing some good success there. That along with our core curriculum revisions that we made.
Yeah, did you call those pandemic plans? Is that what you said earlier?
I did. I called them pandemic plans.
Very, very nice. One of the things that I think, you know, Dana, you and Amador both said was, you know, Amador, you called it unfinished learning, and Dana, you talked about an asset lens. And I think that's a real important piece, the way we frame it. That, you know, there's several college level courses in science, say like chemistry, that I didn't ever take. And I wouldn't say that I have learning loss in chemistry. I just never did anything. In those same ways, when you're looking at those third grade topics to revisit, Amador, at the start of fourth grade, importantly, it sounds like you were also sort of using that asset lens Dana mentioned, in that you're saying to teachers, this isn't unfinished learning, it's learning that may not have happened. And let's go into it thinking, you know, the students are capable of it. They haven't lost anything or missed anything. We know that, and that's the title of this whole session, building on the brilliance of students, that we know that the capacity for students to think hasn't gone anywhere. Amador, is sort of just in response to that sort of idea of an asset lens and the unfinished learning, what kinds of conversations have you had on your team in your district about that framing and building on student strength?
Well, it's funny that Dana mentioned it, because over the summer I attended and read some research on the idea of assets versus deficits. So I began that language in our district, and so when we talk to teachers, we always talk about what are your assets first, because we want to recognize that teachers have lots of good things happening and they have lots of knowledge. But then turn that around when teachers are talking to students, also talk about their assets. And the message for us has been, your students come in with multiple assets, and we need to access those assets to determine where we need to go from there. And so we've adopted the whole assets versus deficits discussion. Anytime we have a data meeting, in fact, I was at a few campuses yesterday talking about our 9-week assessment data, we always start the conversation with, what are your assets? What are we doing well? We need to build on that, and then we can address the deficits based on how we're doing with our assets.
Excellent. Oh, Dana, I see you hopping in the chat there. Sounds like, go ahead, expound on that a little bit. Yeah.
I just put that to the organizer. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No,
I just wanted to say, I mean, we have this conversation with our language arts counterparts just about how it's not our struggling learners, it's really our striving students. And so how do we just build on that mindset? Because a lot of times you'll hear students, well, this is kind of my struggling group. Why don't we reframe that? And those are the students that are striving still.
Yeah, the language that we use to frame these situations really has an impact on how we tackle them. One of the things that sort of both of you mentioned is how you're leveraging DreamBox as a way to support some of this differentiation. And for those of you who are on the call who might not know, DreamBox specifically, we do allow students to be working at multiple grade levels, any grade level of content. We really have our technology be age and grade agnostic. And part of that is, a big part of that is recognizing not every learner operates on the same schedule. And so there's also some, it's interesting when we report data to say like a fourth grader is really working on things in second grade in DreamBox, we don't internally say that student is like struggling, because honestly, they can be doing just fine on the second grade content, not having any cognitive difficulties. They're just not on the same schedule. So one question came in from Yira, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, just asking, how do you align an adaptive curriculum with a fixed curriculum for face-to-face instruction? And I can talk about the DreamBox product aspect of it, but both of you mentioned how you're using DreamBox a little bit. Just can you answer that question in your words about how you talk with your teachers and in your district about how DreamBox as an adaptive curriculum still complements the sort of fixed curriculum as the question put it. And Dana, we'll start, or Amador, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that we're really fortunate with DreamBox is that kind of our fixed curriculum resource that we use is Bridges in Mathematics. And so DreamBox actually has an alignment piece to that resource in the program. And so when we have some students that are striving, we might, the teachers might use that resource to do some small group ahead of time in DreamBox, so that when the content comes up in the whole group interactive session, that the students have already had some experience with that. So it partners really nicely. And plus we also have lots of models that we're using with our core curriculum that is also replicated within DreamBox. So it's actually somewhat seamless for our teachers. And we, as part of our daily schedule, have a small group instruction kind of protected time that we have students working in small groups. And this is where they could be, working towards their 5 lessons in DreamBox some of the days, as well as with the teacher or doing their workplace games.
Yeah, that's definitely how we want it to be, fairly seamless, and to be able to have teachers find the topics they're learning in the Bridges program. Just use that as a way to find DreamBox lessons that can help support that concept. Amador, how about for you?
It was a struggle initially because it doesn't align with our scope and sequence. But as DreamBox has said, we let the magic happen. And so what we've done is communicated to teachers that and it's a shift in thinking. You have to trust the program to do its job because it's an adaptive program. I tell teachers it's like having a one-to-one tutor with the student. They may not be working on what you're working in the scope and sequence, but they're still getting a lot of gaps filled, and they're learning different ways of basically learning mathematics, and that's okay. And so it's starting to really take hold. It's working very nicely now. The biggest challenge was to convince teachers that to trust the adaptive model, and convince them to know that it's like having an individualized tutor with the student. And so now it's working rather well. We're getting tremendous usage. Kids are completing their 5 lessons, and we're starting to see the correlations between the data that DreamBox is supplying to our district assessments, and we can definitely now see where we can address some of the gaps that the kids may be having.
That's that analogy of like having a tutor is one we think about a lot, and we try to aspire to. And analogy I kind of use that's kind of along the same lines is, if you've got a music teacher teaching orchestra or band or something at your school, and maybe one of the clarinet players, I'll use it, my daughter, she plays clarinet for the band, but she's also in some private piano lessons. And does the band teacher need to say, here, you need to be playing this piano music? Or is it, when she's not in band class, she is developing musicality with a different instrument, with different music, and that's an okay thing. We should be excited that teachers, that students are, doing some self-directed mathematics, getting that support in DreamBox. And with the assignment feature in DreamBox, Dana, you were mentioning using bridges and things. When we first launched it, there were some teachers who were like, oh, this is great. I love being able to assign DreamBox as manipulatives for this concept. It's going to be helpful. Hey, DreamBox, could you show me some things that I should be assigning to my students? And we kind of chuckled because that's what DreamBox is doing all the time, right? That you don't need the assignments feature for it. But Amador, like you mentioned, it's a mindset shift, and we know that we have to earn the trust that you're asking your teachers to put in our program. So we think about that a whole lot. The last thing you said, Amador, is a good bridge to our next question in a way. You said that you're seeing in the DreamBox data some correlations with your district assessment data and your other things. So there's a whole lot of conversation happening right now. I think 520 education assessment researchers just sent a letter to Education Secretary Cardona about waivers for state testing again this year, and some education like there's a whole conversation happening right now. I wouldn't say there's one unified view, but there is quite a bit of, hey, we have so much to do right now. Why are we adding standardized testing to the plate? And we need data on like there's a big conversation. How, and Amador, we'll start with you. How are you thinking? I put the word differently here about your assessment and data practices because I think our thinking needs to be different. We might land the same place we were before, but talk a little bit about that district assessment piece, how you're thinking about data.
Well, we've got to measure learning somehow. And while I agree that perhaps the standardized testing should go away at some point, we still have to measure assessment. We have to measure learning. And so what we've done is we're using our data from our district assessments to measure where students are at on every 9 weeks. We really haven't changed that practice. We still assess them every 9 weeks. But like I said, we have done some correlations with the DreamBox data, and it really matches where our kids are in our district assessments. And so we're using that conversation piece as well, and telling teachers, if you see a student miss a particular concept or a particular question, go back to your DreamBox data and see if there's a gap in maybe a grade level before, maybe even 2 grade levels before. It probably ties to that particular concept. In terms of what we're going to use, how we're going to use our assessment data at the end of the year when we start tests, we're going to use that data to adjust our scope and sequences, to adjust our learning. I think it's still going to be valuable for us to have some kind of a measurement piece so that we can move forward and make sure that we're on the right track when we start the following year.
Yeah. Are those district assessments things you created in-house?
Yes, we create them in-house based off of our scope and sequence every 9 weeks. Of course, we pull questions from all over, and we've used STAR type questions. All of our questions are STAR type. We've rewritten quite a few questions, but yes, we create our own.
Yeah, we had done a similar thing. That's a pretty hefty undertaking, but it's definitely, I mean, it was nice to be able to craft our own questions and tweak some things, because at the end of the day, that helps us answer to teachers like, I feel like this question was worded incorrect. Oh well, that's on us. We can fix it. There's sort of a it was a lot of work, but I think it was worth it to get ownership, at least when we did it in our district. Dana, how about for you? What's your current thinking around assessment practices in your elementary math sphere?
So we're really trying to look through the lens of teaching is assessing, and really move away from this assessment as an event that has to, you have to sit down with the teacher or sit down and do with your pen and paper. And so we're really trying to move away from that, and that as skilled educators, you're always assessing students and where they are. And so how can we support that documentation to give us more information about where we are in our learning? And what role do students play in self-assessing where they are in their learning? And so I think that philosophy pairs nicely with what DreamBox has done with the predictive insights piece, because it's not a one-shot assessment that you sit down and take and it tells you where you are or how you're doing. It really is looking at how students perform over time in DreamBox. And so that's exactly what we want to see our teachers doing in the classroom. This year, we did not have district assessments. We made those optional for teachers to use with students because we wanted to kind of pull a little bit back on some of the stress level that some of our teachers were feeling. And we usually had 2 curriculum-based assessments a year, but we made those optional and we made those electronic as well. So that was a shift that we made. But again, if teachers didn't choose to take those, we also provided some unit checks that would happen before the unit so that they could do some pre-assessing to know where they needed to spend a little bit more time in the unit. We also have standards-based report cards, and so that's another area where we can pull data because, again, over time, over those 9 weeks period, the teacher should be assessing for those report card checks, and so we're able to look at that data to also see where students are in their learning.
Very nice, and it sounds like first of all, being able to make it electronic, that's very helpful at a time like this. And I enjoy hearing both of your perspectives and what you've done this past year on this, because every context is different. Every organization has certain, capacities and needs that, there's different approaches to it. I think having the curriculum-based assessments key. And Amador, it sounds like your 9-week district assessments were aligned with what had been taught in the previous 9 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We make sure that anytime we assess anything, it's aligned to what we teach.
Yeah, that was something the district assessments I had created years ago didn't quite have that, and in hindsight, I probably would have made that call as well. How high up in grade levels do those district assessments go for you, Amador?
We start at 2nd all the way up to EOC Algebra 1, and then the Algebra 2 and on at the high schools, they create their own district assessments for their in-class instruction, but we provide the blueprints for them to make sure that they're testing what they're teaching.
Nice. All right. So now one of the things that when we were planning on our call, one of the things that I know both of you have some really good ideas and thoughts on, and where I think in general, when I go to, math leader conferences, NCSM, things like this, so much of the conversation is around, okay, we know what the goals are in a lot of ways. We have a lot of assessment tools, both formative and summative at our disposal. But when the rubber hits the road, what's happening in the classroom, whether hybrid or remote, is really going to have the most lasting impact on how students are, what they believe mathematics is all about, how confident they feel as their own as learners in mathematics. So as you think about pedagogy, classroom practices, my hunch is that this is maybe the area where there's been the least amount of change since the pandemic. It's like quality teaching and learning and how the brain makes sense of math. The pandemic didn't change that, probably, but maybe a switch to some temporary hybrid or remote, or using more technology tools, maybe that does enable some new classroom practice for getting at that, those pedagogical and classroom practices. So what sorts of, I put new here, but you could just say, what classroom practices are you hoping teachers are using? And Dana, we'll start with you. What are your conversations about that around pedagogy, lesson design, stuff like that?
Well, obviously, one of the challenges is the discourse in the classroom and having students partnering and sharing with each other. And when we think about sharing manipulatives, that was kind of a big challenge as we brought students back. We also started back in September, but we were only at about 50% in person around that time. And it's continued.
Real quick, When you say sharing manipulatives, you mean, oh, we got to disinfect these plastic tiles before? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, because we really want to see an active math classroom. We want to see students engaging in discourse with their peers, but also their teacher. We want to see them, sharing the pen or sharing the marker as they're working things out on whiteboards. So it really had to kind of shift. And what we've seen is, first of all, our teachers have been great with coming up with solutions. They just amaze me every day. But actually, teachers were like, it's kind of helped our kids work better together because one student will have the pen, but the other student has to justify their thinking to the person to be able to record or those types of things. So really kind of heightening up that justifying and explaining your mathematical reasoning. I recently saw something on Twitter that I think is worth saying, how we have shifted maybe from reading, writing, and arithmetic to reading, writing, and reasoning, because those are the skills that we want students to walk away with and be able to work together to problem solve. And, we also have had to think over the years, what's our, how do we define problem solving? Is that just a word problem? No, because we are problem solving all the time in mathematics. And so really in our classrooms, what we want to see is students and teachers working together. We want to see that productive struggle. We want to see them sharing their strategies. We want to see them communicating with each other. And so we've had to work around that a little bit. But I think overall, they've come up with some very creative solutions, and I think some of these practices that they'll continue to move forward with.
I love that. Teachers are very creative, given so many constraints that they have to operate under. I was talking with my 6th grade daughter a couple weeks ago. She had a test coming up on percentages, and she was getting a little stressed. She's like, she was doing fine with it, but she's like, I just don't remember how to do this. And I was like, math is not about remembering. Math is about reasoning. So I'm very big on that. And with percentages, there's just so many great ways to reason through things. One clarifying question, like when I've gone into places, like I had to go to the bank and they've got a bunch of pens to sign, and they're like, these are the clean pens, and then here's the dirty pens that we'll disinfect later. Did I hear you say correctly, when kids are working in small groups, one has the marker and the whiteboard and there just aren't things to share, so another student in the group has to be able to communicate what the student's going to write down for their group's work on the whiteboard? That's been a change in discourse you've seen. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, or they may be playing a game together, and so instead of using, 2 separate game boards, we typically, try to have them on the same game board, but maybe they're telling one person where to move their marker because only that one person is touching the game board or touching the whiteboard. So they're having to really communicate more about their thinking and where that game marker should be moved or what equation should be written. And so I think it's up kind of the partnership in that way to be able to be able to justify their thinking.
Yeah, that's a.
I also just wanted to
fun
throw in too that we still have students that are at home, and so that's a challenge for teachers as well. But we've seen some in-person students partnering online with our at-home students when they are interacting with a game that has been created for them in Google Slides. And so we kind of have encouraged that partnership too across classrooms, even though we've kept our in-person students with a separate teacher than our virtual learners. But so that's been interesting to see the collaboration across the classrooms more as well.
Very nice, very nice. Amador, over to you. And let me remind everybody, we've got about 15 minutes left. We do want to field any questions that you have, so throw them in the chat, throw them in the questions. We want to make sure that we're, have a chance to discuss things that are top of mind for you. So Amador, classroom practices, you all have been 80% in person, I think you said, since August. So is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes. And so we did all the things that Dana talked about. We are we know that in elementary, mathematics has to be collaborative. Kids need to talk, they need to share, all the things. And we came up with the challenge of how do we keep that practice and still keep students safe. We actually we made little bags for kids. So every student had bags with their own manipulatives, with their own supplies, so that they could still interact with each other, but using their own supplies. And so we did that. And then the other thing that we did that some principals have expressed that they still want to keep, even when this is over, instead of having kids move, the teachers moved from class to class. They felt like they were getting a lot more instruction done because the teachers were moving. I had one principal tell me the other day that she hasn't used her cafeteria all year because the kids are getting to eat lunch in their classrooms. And so it's created a little bit more time for instruction. But still, the expectation was that hopefully kids could still interact, still do the cooperative structures, still have discourse, all the things. We just had to come up with some safe way of doing. And one of the things we did was making sure teachers were moving and also providing each student with their own supply bag, if you will, of the things that they needed.
It's funny. I'm thinking back when I was in elementary school. I think every grade level I moved from class to class, except in fifth grade. The fifth grade teachers had decided that the teachers would move and the students would stay in the same place. And I remember thinking, "Huh, that's interesting." Each teacher had their little cart. I was a traveling teacher one year at high school, and so I didn't have a cart. I went with a bag. Like I felt like I was a college professor. But that to rethink that as a health precaution that also gets you some instructional time back is, that's making the best of a bad situation and maybe learning some ways to save a bit of time, which we know we're so strapped for. And certainly, I also, as a student, would have just loved to have my own bag of math manipulatives. Like that would have been, I was kind of a geek for school supplies when I was a kid. But also, I remember very vividly in first grade, there were the I don't remember the name, the place value blocks. You got the little teeny tiny cubes, the strips of 10, the flat hundreds, and then the giant Borg looking Star Trek cubes of 1,000. And they just sat on the shelf all year. And I just wanted to behold it and hold it. That 1,000 is just amazing to me. I know those probably weren't in your bag kits because those are a rare item, but still to have that a way for students to feel like something about math is more their own is excellent. So we got a question that popped in here. Let's go ahead and hop to that one. We have a question from Lori. Curious about what next steps will be for your districts next year with still maybe a few elements of what's unknown. And then a question about how can DreamBox support that? What are some silver linings? So let's start this first question. In your mind, what's still a little unknown? What's some uncertainty you have as this year comes to an end and you're looking ahead to next year? What's top of mind in terms of uncertainty?
Tim, you cut out for me, or did you call on me?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I just I didn't know if either one of you hop in. That was awkward panel silence. That's a moderator fail. So Dana, are you expecting 100% full in-person vaccinations? Like we'll be in a place where everyone can be in a more safe environment this fall. But yeah, what do you think is your district not sure about for next year? What's the unknowns?
So I'll just say, I mean, we're not obviously 100% sure, but our hope is that we are going to, be 100% in person for the 21-22 school year. We will be opening up our 28th elementary. So, we're eager to get students back in the building and resume whatever normal is again. But I think as we've talked earlier, there's a lot of practices that we are looking to carry forward with us. I will say that some of the work that we're already looking forward to doing this summer with our teacher curriculum design teams is to really think about that challenge and enrichment piece. We did a lot of support to include some re-engagement work for students that were coming in, maybe striving a little bit more. But as far as we have students that are ready to fly, right? And so we're going to be bringing teachers together to kind of look at what are some those open-ended, really great math tasks that we can challenge and engage more students in that are ready to, you know, dig a little deeper. And so that's some of the work that we're going to do, but also just kind of thinking about how we can continue to leverage the technology in an engaging, meaningful way in our classrooms as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Amador, how about for you? What are some unknowns for next year in your district?
Well, like Dana, we also hope to go 100% back. That's our plan, and so based on that, we are definitely working on some summer PD for our teachers that will be offered both face to face and virtually, because we do feel that there is value in the virtual space as well, and so that's going to be our biggest challenge over the summer is again figuring out what potential gaps we might have and how we can address them, you know, when we hit the floor running back in August. And so but again, that's all going to happen if this thing doesn't get out of hand again, and we feel like it won't. We feel like we're on the right trajectory. So we're hoping that in August everybody comes back and we're ready to rock and roll and get learning started.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the second part of Laura's question was about how is DreamBox going to support some goals moving forward, and I'm going to share a couple of slides about some things we have in development that we're pretty excited about. The first thing is we had done a survey with PBS and Education Week, a research center, a while back, and not surprisingly, most educators, nearly all, think technology is an effective way to really help personalize and differentiate learning. That wasn't like, that was more confirmatory. And for those of you who are maybe looking for, you know, Dana, you had just mentioned technology. If you're looking at evaluating technology tools, I'd suggest folks check out Alive in the Swamp. It's a short read from Michael Fullen and Caitlin Donnelly. You may have heard of Michael Fullen. He's done a lot of work. He's international speaker, ASCD author, so things like that. And it's the only education technology piece I know that has the word swamp in the title, so it's pretty easy to find. But you know, they mentioned this is back in 2013, that one of the issues with technology is it's usually just video instruction and then a series of, you know, multiple choice kinds of questions, and so many digital innovations are just doing the same age-old practices in a digital format. And at DreamBox, we are, you know, excited that that's not what we're doing. We want to come alongside teachers and help students engage with mathematics concepts in ways that you can only get in a digital environment. So teachers don't look at the DreamBox lessons and say, oh, I could create that, or oh, I've been doing that. It's, oh, this is a whole new innovative way to connect. So DreamBox is going to keep doing that differentiation piece, to be sure. And we are in the process of you know, having some new reporting insights that here, let me a couple of recent Education Week articles about math specifically. Here's a couple of quotes. You know, teachers are ditching answer getting math tests, which invite cheating, in favor of assessments that ask students to explain how they reach solutions. Trina Wilkerson, the NCTM president, she's like, teachers are thinking creatively and outside the box, and how to assess student understanding and thinking, and then how to use that to support instructional decisions. So that's really where we are at DreamBox right now, trying to figure out better ways to provide even more insights, even richer insights than we already are. So one of the things, as a sneak peek, for those of you who are interested, we are have a new feature that's going to be coming out for back to school called Student Next Steps, where, you know, this is Charlie Brown's report, and the first thing you had heard Dana mention, the predictions. Potentially on track is Charlie's current prediction for how he'll do on the end of year state test. We also have student messaging that we launched last year when the pandemic hit to help teachers and students stay connected. So when students finish a lesson, they can say, hey, I'm feeling good about this, or you know what, I need more time, or hey, I need a break. Really good social emotional learning kinds of components. And then here's where it gets pretty even cooler. We're surfacing more information about the kinds of lessons that DreamBox is recommending for Charlie. So you can take a look at the lesson group, see what it's all about, see the Texas state standards, see how proficient he is, and then surfacing other students who are working on that same topic right now, as well as their prediction and their proficiency. So this is just a quick way for teachers to know, okay, which students might I need to support? What can I help them with? And you know what? If I want to make a small group and have some rich dialogue, who might I, have the student work with? So pretty excited about that. And then lastly, the type of learning we have in DreamBox, roughly speaking, 3 different kinds of tasks. One of them is like exploration, sense making, early concept development, connecting visual and symbolic representations. But then we have lessons where we add some constraints. You know what? You can build out the partial products however you want, but you can only use 2 helper equations, what we call them, right? So to help students think more strategically, mathematically, see some relationships. And then we, of course, have skill practice, fluency, math facts, and to surface on the reporting which types of learning students are working on is really going to be provide a lot of insight, because sometimes students might be clicking the hint button and there's no hint available and they're wondering, what's that about? Well, that's probably a skill practice lesson where students need to do things independently without any hints. So, and teachers don't know that, and we want to provide teachers and equip them with as much possible insight as possible. We also have just the last piece. We have in development ways for teachers to watch how students are solving problems. That's a little bit further down the line, not going to be ready anytime soon, but we're currently in development with that because we know there's value there in seeing how students are taking the values in a word problem and creating an expression. So Lori, to answer your question, that's one of the ways DreamBox is helping. You heard Dana and Amador both discuss how DreamBox is partnering on the differentiation piece, and those are a few things that that we're working on. So I think we have about 2 minutes left. I want to go ahead, and I don't have any other big questions, but final thoughts from each of you. Dana, in conclusion, what sort of final thoughts would you like to share? And then we'll go to Amador.
Well, I just think it's an exciting time, a challenging time to be an educator. And so I'm thrilled to be able to partner with our teachers and our parents and community and students as we continue to offer the best education for all of our learners. And so I just, I feel like it's empowering to be able to think outside the box, to be able to, we're being in this position for 12 years. Sometimes, you just get stuck in the way that we've always done things. Well, that hasn't worked this year. And so it is empowering to start thinking about things in a new way. And, my role is to help empower others as we go on this journey together. So I thank you for the opportunity to be part of the panel today. And I'm excited with our continued partnership with DreamBox as we move forward to do what's best for learners.
Thank you, Dana. Amador, closing thoughts?
Well, it's been a ride. I would say it's always been a fun ride, but it's been challenging. But I totally concur with Dana. It's given us a new way of thinking. It's definitely has challenged us to think outside the box. It's challenged us to challenge other people to think outside the box. So we've gotten out of our own comfort zone, but I think it's made us better educators. And I think moving forward, we're going to adopt a lot of things that we discovered this year will work, and we're going to keep those things, and then we're going to throw away things that don't work, like we normally do. But it's been a challenging year, but also been a fun year at times. I so do appreciate every educator that's out there that has gone beyond what they were supposed to do for kids. We are in this business for students, and I really admire all teachers that have struggled with us. And again, I want to thank DreamBox for having us today. I value so much the partnership we have. And like Dana, with our community, with our parents, with all our stakeholders. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't have said those things better myself, for both of you. I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate you sharing your insights and experiences with everyone today. We know that DreamBox is one piece. We hope a valuable and important piece, but one piece of everything you're trying to do in your communities and in your mathematics programs. And it's our privilege to help support you any way that we can. So with that, thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Amador. Everybody stay well, stay healthy, and take care.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone. We hope that this was a great webinar and that you enjoyed the information and hearing from Dana, Amador, and Tim. I know I really enjoyed this discussion. If you'd like to learn more about anything about DreamBox, please visit dreambox.com and you can reach us from there. Otherwise, this recording will be available and we'll send a follow-up email and everything if you'd like to see it again or pass it along to anyone else. But with that, thank you so much for joining. We can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning to have this discussion. And we hope you have a great day and rest of week. Thanks. Bye.